So in this video we're going to talk about the arms in the start of the downswing, and the reason for this is because I get a lot of questions about whether you should pull your arms down, whether I should drive my elbow to the side of me, or whether I should throw the club. And I think the reason why there's confusion is because obviously it's open to interpretation in terms of what your trail arm is doing, and I mean this from a golf coaching perspective. The easiest way to get away from the confusion is to understand what your trail hand is fundamentally doing in the downswing. And I think the easiest way to do this, and I do this with online students, it's very beneficial. If you grab a little bit of rope and lasso it together, pop your head through it and pop your left arm through it, you end up creating, and then obviously if you hold it, hold an imaginary, say, 7-iron, and then take hold of it with just your trail hand. The whole point of this exercise is that you're basically replacing your left arm with a piece of string. And the reason for that is because you can now be aware of what the tension is doing. Okay, now at no time, and this is what amateurs do, at no time do you want this to go limp. Okay, now if you move your downswing like this, so your hands get closer, this goes limp. If you let your upper arm move too far away from your body, it'll go limp at this stage. So at every moment in time, you basically want your right arm or your trail arm to be applying a pressure on the outward part of the string, so it's pushing the string so it always stays tense, right, all the way up until the post-impact position. So that's the first thing to understand, that your hand, sort of like skimming a stone, is always applying a pressure outward. Okay, now what else do we need to know that's going to influence the feeling as to whether it's a pull or whether it's a throw or whether it's a drive? Well, the first thing that I would say is, as I start my downswing here, your upper arm has to move closer towards the side of your body. It has to, because if my upper arm stays away from my body and I pull down with the hands, that's a disaster, right? That's your over-the-top golf. For somebody who's kind of very over-the-top, the upper arm doesn't move down to the side of the body. You pull down on the handle and you get too vertical, right? That's a disaster. So if we avoid that then, and we understand that the upper arm should move down, again, is it a pulling action? Is it a throwing action? Which action is it? Well, look, the best way to do this is to practice it. But before you practice it, I think the reason why most amateur golfers suffer with this is not so much to do with this, it's to do with this. See, what we know with professional golfers is as they start the downswing, they move the pelvis into the left leg. And this is kind of, if you know, like a shifting the pelvis left, turning into a solid left side sort of analogy. And this is the thing that I work with a lot of my students on. Because when you turn the pelvis correctly into the leg, not only do you transfer the weight quite naturally, but it also creates a tilt, because my head can now stay still. Now what happens with most amateurs is they start the downswing this way. See the way my spine is very vertical. And if my spine's very vertical, my right shoulder's very horizontal, or it's popped up. So your release is kind of irrelevant, because if you pull down, it's a disaster. If you throw, it's a disaster. Do you see what I mean? You can't really win. Whilst if you turn the pelvis into the leg to the point where it creates more of a tilt, and this is what I love with students that I meet, giving them this feeling, because it's the thing they're crying out for, all of a sudden it's a game changer. Because if I now initiate my downswing from the correct pivoting action, it doesn't matter, because I could pull, and it will pull my arms into location. I could throw, and it will throw the club through. So theoretically, it's all the sort of same thing. The two mistakes that you want to avoid, is it's not necessarily that you need to be cautious in terms of what you're telling yourself. It doesn't really matter whether you're pulling it down. It doesn't really matter if you feel like you're throwing it through. It doesn't make a difference, as long as you don't do one of two things. If you pivot poorly, which I would, just for clarification, it's worth checking, I'd say 95% of golfers spin like this and turn like this, then you can't release correctly. Or if you've got theoretically a good pivot, but your upper arm moves away from your body, then it doesn't matter as well. That has to do this, that has to do this. What you choose to do with your trail arm, theoretically, as long as you practice with a bit of rope and it's always applying a pressure in an outward fashion, doesn't make a difference. Then you can make up your own feeling for it. And that's why I think it's important to understand what your trail arm is really doing in the golf swing. So hopefully this helps, and I'll see you guys again really soon.